Thank you very much for your time today. I know that we have a very busy geopolitical backdrop and trade environment as well. Let me start with you on trade, because we understand that South Korea is still trying to finalize and write out a trade agreement with the U.S. When could we see that?
This negotiation wasn't initiated by us. We didn't start from a position of advantage, nor did we raise the issues. Isn't that the case for the entire world? Since the whole world is negotiating under the new conditions presented by the United States, rather than insisting on specific conditions, the correct answer would be that certain things are simply difficult to achieve. Therefore, anything that exceeds the limits of what the Republic of Korea can bear in terms of national interests, acceptability, capacity, or public understanding will be quite difficult to undertake.
Are the issues that need to be resolved around the $350 billion investment fund into the U.S.?
That's generally the case, since the framework for the large amount is already set. The fact that the amount is fixed means it started with the expectation that depending on how that amount is structured, it could potentially be mutually beneficial. However, the structure itself, how the funds are raised or how the profits are distributed, these things need to be within the bounds of what's considered normal. And when explaining to our Korean citizens, it needs to be at a level where they can understand and accept it. Above all, it must be within the capacity of our Korean economy to handle.
President Lee talked about the need for a currency swap agreement in order to avoid any shocks to the Korean economy when delivering these funds. What has Washington said so far?
I haven't heard the exact details yet on how they've responded so far. However, as the president has already stated, that amount currently represents 70 to 80% of Korea's total foreign exchange reserves. Without measures like swaps or similar mechanisms, the impact on the Korean economy will be too severe. Also, as a nation that had experienced a foreign exchange crisis, public vigilance on this matter is high. I believe these factors must be taken into consideration.
When it comes to the tariff themselves, we still have to see the U.S. actually lowering car tariffs on South Korea to the agreed 15%. And even if the tariffs were lowered, the tariff advantage that South Korean car makers had over Japan, for example, 2.5% before the Trump trade deal, that's going to disappear. How painful is that for South Korean firms right now?
First, the FTA structure between us and the U.S. is changing, and that will create a burden. Naturally, if tariffs drop from 25 to 15%, that will be better, but it's still harder than before, and especially at this point. There's the difficulty of having to bear the 25% until this negotiation concludes. So, in short, there are difficulties. Hyundai Motor and others are facing particular challenges. However, as far as we understand, Hyundai Motor currently plans to navigate this situation without changing its pricing policy for now. I personally view this as a relatively wise approach. The government is reviewing various policy options to see what can be done to alleviate the burden on the automotive sector caused by the ongoing negotiations.
More problematic also for Korean companies has been the visa issue, especially with the plant in Georgia. What sort of resolution can we expect on that front?
Before discussing what kind of solution there is, realistically, without a solution, it's difficult to invest in the United States and carry out the various joint projects currently planned between South Korea and the U.S. We absolutely must find a solution. Several projects are underway between South Korea and the U.S. Without resolving the visa issue, meaningful progress remains virtually impossible. The detention incident dealt a severe blow not only to the general Korean public, but especially to the workers who were actually detained. In the absence of firm assurances regarding their safety, both they and their families are understandably reluctant to enter the U.S. again while this matter remains unresolved.
Are investment projects right now halted until some resolution is acquired on the visa issue?
Although the projects have not been entirely halted or formally placed on hold, it will be very difficult for a large number of workers to enter or re-enter the U.S. until this problem is resolved.
South Korean firms are also seeing challenges, for example, in China, especially when it comes to U.S. chip restrictions for Beijing, Korean firms operating in China. How can South Korea manage the growing tech rivalry between China and the United States?
That's a problem the whole world is grappling with. It's a natural concern, especially for countries like Korea that share significant economic ties with both the United States and China. Naturally, we strive to maintain good relations with all neighboring countries. However, we understand that the overall plate we stand on has tilted slightly compared to the past.
In what way?
The terrain itself has tilted towards strengthening our relationship with the United States. I can answer it in that way.
What does that mean for China-Korea relations then?
I think China understands this too. If Korea, standing on this larger terrain, demonstrates appropriate efforts to maintain its relationship with China, understanding the changed terrain, then even on that terrain, Korea can still strive to maintain its relationship with China.
But the U.S. has had so many demands for South Korea, including, for example, raising defense spending, 5% of GDP, as for NATO, for example.
With respect to defense spending, I do not believe it must necessarily be considered in connection with our relations with other countries. Rather, it is an area that can be expanded as part of strengthening our independent national defense.
By how much?
Recently, we mentioned 3.5%, and we did so because we judge that this is a level we are capable of sustaining.
Are we expecting any contact between North Korean leader Kim Jong Un and President Trump during the upcoming APEC summit?
Both of them are currently evaluating the relationship between the two parties positively. Since unforeseen events can always occur, I believe we should keep that possibility open. But so far, North Korea and Chairman Kim Jong Un are showing no signs of changing their stance.
President Lee created a positive foundation for South Korea-Japan ties during his last visit to Tokyo. We might see a leadership change in Japan. Could this have an impact on Korea-Japan relations as well?
We hope that won't be the case. We believe it is undesirable for relations between nations to be significantly impacted or altered by changes in leadership. While we also face various challenges, we have prioritized diplomatic continuity and are working to further improve relations with Japan. Regardless of who becomes Japan's new prime minister, we expect and hope that they will consider various factors to ensure that the current, newly formed friendly atmosphere is not adversely affected.